Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Saturday, July the 20th, 2024. So here's a look at the latest GOES 16 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There's a link in the description below this video, and we're looking at the entire Atlantic basin right now. Here's Africa off towards the east of the image, so you can see the far east. Here is the Leeward and Windward Islands. Here is the Dominican Republic as well as Cuba. The Bahamas are over here. And as we look at this imagery, of course, there is not a lot of tropical activity going on, and that's because we have a lot of Saharan air outbreak going on right now. We have one tropical wave wrapped up in that dusty air, which is located over the Bahamas, over the Dominican Republic, and Cuba. We have a very strong tropical wave that came off of Africa nearly a day and a half ago. Behind this, there's a lot of hot, dry, dusty Saharan air. In fact, there is so much dusty air moving off of Africa. I've seen some of the images coming out of that area. The sun is not to be seen, and the sky is pretty dark in color, yellow and orange, because of how thick the dust actually is there. We'll be looking at that area in just a second, but as a whole, the Atlantic really nice and quiet, all thanks to the dry, warm, dusty Saharan air moving off of Africa. But we all know there are signs that this is going to change by early to mid-August. So here's another perspective at looking at the Saharan dust on a blue marble satellite imagery. This is from zoom.earth.com. There will be a link in the description below this video leading to that website. Very cool satellite images that update every 10 minutes here. And we can see that there is so much Saharan dust, you could really make the outline of it. You can even see a little bit of suppression here of dust, but big time SAL outbreak coming off of Africa right now. And so much so is if we actually zoom in just a little bit, you cannot really distinguish a whole lot between the continent here of Africa and the Atlantic Ocean, which is just to its west. There is just so much dust here. And like I said, I wish I had the images in today's video, but the sun there is not to be seen. And if there is any sunshine, it is very hard to make out and really not really noticeable. And secondly, the sky there is yellow and orange in color during the daytime. And of course, at night, it turns red as the sun sets. And then you're not able to see any stars because it's just like clouds in the sky, only that this is Saharan dust. So very, very big Saharan air outbreak right now taking place. So now the question is, how much more Saharan dust will continue coming off of Africa at keeping the Atlantic from getting active with tropical cyclones? Well, it's going to be a while here. I don't think we're going anywhere with this dust, probably at least for the next 7 or 8 days. And this did not update within the last 24 hours. There has been some issues, but this gives us a rough idea what the forecast is showing here with Saharan air right now. So we can see a big plume of that. That's what we were seeing on the satellite imagery. If we go forward all the way into the middle of next week, you can see this big plume here. This is a very classic signal here of SAL, or Saharan air layer. And then as we go forward, that first piece moves into Texas and Louisiana, so get ready to see some nasty looking skies, maybe more red, vibrant sunsets by Wednesday and Thursday if you're in Texas. And of course, getting into the Leeward and Windward Islands, perhaps by Friday, we're going to see another piece of dust moving over your area. And then by the end of the forecast model, we start to wane away from the Saharan dust, but still out there at preventing any cyclones from developing. But we know this is climatology, and we are still expected to see this dust abate by early August, just in time when we begin to get the general ramp up of the Atlantic basin coming to life for the meat of the hurricane season. So now you might be asking, why does the Saharan air layer prevent any tropical cyclones or hurricanes? Well, imagining the Saharan air layer as a hot, warm, or dry, well, it kind of goes hand in hand, hot or dry or warm or dry air above the marine boundary layer, which is a moist pocket of air, right? Imagining your dew points right above the surface of the ocean here, of the Atlantic, being in the in the low to mid 80s, right? And you go above that layer where it actually warms up, but also there's a huge dew point depression that takes place. So imagining now you're, say, 10,000 feet above the surface, your air temperature is, say, 75 degrees or even 70 degrees, but your dew point is like negative 10 or 15 degrees. You're going to have very dry air overlapping that boundary layer. And so what this illustrates is, here's Africa over here, and as that air blows off of Africa through the West African monsoon jet, or WAJ is how you say it, or EAJ, either way you put it. And that dust moves off of Africa and it moves over the Atlantic. And this is basically an inhibitor of tropical cyclone formation. So this time of the year, that's why we don't typically see a lot of hurricanes or tropical storms, because we have this Saharan air layer that is very strong thanks to surface heating that usually leads to a lot of turbulence, a lot of warm air convectively moving upward, and it brings the dust with it. And then once wind kicks up, it moves it offshore, if that makes sense. So indeed, this is a lid. This is a inversion. This is what we like to see to prevent any hurricanes. It's bad if we don't see that, because that means now the Atlantic is open for business and we're able to get tropical cyclone formation if other perimeters come together. Therefore, the National Hurricane Center does not expect any tropical development in the next 7 days. Regardless of what weather YouTuber you watch, they might say, hey, we have a tropical wave that might develop into something. Based on my forecast, I am not seeing any development either, and you should also expect that, at least for the time being. But once we get into the peak of hurricane season, this will change in a hurry. So now, taking a look at the latest GFS numerical global computer model forecast for the tropics here over the Atlantic, and what we're looking at here is the low levels of the atmosphere. This is the 850 millibar layer at 5,000 feet above the surface. The color shading that you see on your screen is illustrating how much spin there is in the atmosphere. So, of course, in the northern hemisphere, we get winds that do this. And, of course, in the southern hemisphere, you get winds that do this around a low-pressure system. So, in this case, we are not seeing a whole lot of spin in the atmosphere in the deep tropics, other than just a couple of areas of yellow colors. That is very weak spin and nothing that will really bundle up, thanks to our shield, our Saharan air layer. That's going to prevent anything from developing. So as we go forward in time here on the latest GFS model, we can see in the next 4 days, still nothing to really monitor. So quiet for the time being. And then as we go forward in time, we do have another big tropical wave coming off of Africa here. You can see the wave axis here, but again, the background state not favorable for tropical cyclone genesis at all. Saharan dust, the isotropic layer, very dry. We got wind shear to deal with. Just not a favorable environment for any cyclone genesis to develop. Once we go forward into July the 30th, then we start looking more towards the possibility of some development way down the road, perhaps by the 2nd or the 3rd of July. And what I mean by that, we have trade winds doing this, and then they curl around. See this intertropical convergence zone kind of in a shadow like this? This is what we look for. We look for westerly wind anomalies that develop here, moving towards Africa on the downside of a wave. And if the dust it abates and the moisture content is higher and the wind shear is lower, these could wrap up pretty quickly, or at least kind of condense a little bit more, and they could develop as they move further towards the west. In this case, the GFS still not indicating anything, and through at least the 5th of August. Now, I just took you through the 5th of August, and what you see here does not mean that, oh, there is no tropical development through the 5th of August. Good job, David. That's good news. Well, that's based on one run, all right? And it's very hard for global computer models to pick out any vorticity that can spin up this far out. And this is more of a trend that we're looking at. We will be looking at the signs for like winds coming in out of the west like this. They reverse. We see slackening trade winds before we get a tropical wave that is actually able to develop, if that makes sense. Here's a look at the European model, the ECMWF. Also very similar with its deterministic forecast. Again, there's that tropical wave that we talked about. Really not going to develop into anything significant because, again, we have a lot of Saharan dry air off of Africa. And these waves choke up. They get choked by that drier air overwhelming the system. And then at the end of all of it, there's just nothing. Barely even a tropical wave left behind here. Very little in the way of spin. And this ridge up here to the north is very strong for this time of the year. Still stronger than it should be. And that really suppresses any convection down here. And if we get any convection, it is way down here at very low latitude. So I just do not see anything developing at least through the end of the month of July. But on the other hand of things, the ensemble prediction system here from the Euro is showing something a little bit more different, at least towards the early part of August. This is the total precipitable water anomaly forecast. And of course, your surface pressures are at the surface. There's your two high pressure cells. And then, of course, your low level winds are in barbs. So we can see our winds are doing this around this high pressure system like so. And then you could really make out the leading edge of that SAL outbreak. And here comes that next SAL outbreak that you see here. So pretty cool to see this on a total precipitable water imagery forecast. And as we go forward, we can see our next tropical wave coming off of Africa by the 27th or the 28th. There's some mixed signals on how this evolves because during this portion of the forecast, the Saharan dust becomes more uncertain. If there's a lot of it or if there's very little of it will make a huge difference. Right now, we are seeing that tropical wave coming off of Africa, and most of the modeling ensembles from the Euro are not too bullish on this to develop into anything significant. But by the early part of August, we really ramp up the PWATs here well above average. We get a more active West African monsoon period that develops here. And the Saharan dust moves to the north as this develops, and this really opens up the main development region for business as far as the potential for any tropical cyclone genesis to develop. And this would really correspondingly go with an active convective coupled Kelvin wave outbreak event that could move into the Atlantic during this period, during early and mid-August. Now, before all of that does come to fruition in early to mid-August over the main development region, we really have to keep an eye on the sea surface temperatures across the Gulf of Mexico. They are very, very warm as they could possibly get. We have chugged away at some of the sea surface temperatures being very warm across the southern portion or basically off the coast of Louisiana, thanks to a lot of thunderstorm development here. As I mentioned in a couple of videos ago, these are shelf waters. They are able to cool very quickly and warm up very quickly versus the more deeper waters down here in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico within the loop current, which takes a lot more than just thunderstorms to kind of chug away at that heat content. Instead, we have really warm sea surface temperatures off the coast of the west coast of Florida here, Tampa, Florida, Cape Coral, down here, Key West, Florida, seeing water temperatures at least 87, 88 degrees Fahrenheit. We're getting close to 90 degrees over the Bay of Youth, the island of Youth here off the coast of Cuba. So very warm sea surface temperatures, and you all are looking at this and thinking, oh, it's green colors. That's not very significant. Got to understand this is a legend, and this legend does move over to the right as water temperatures warm up, and it moves off to the left when water temperatures cool off. So imagining this, our red colors in the wintertime might be something like 21, 22 Celsius, and then even maybe below that. And in the summertime there, the red colors here are 31, 32 Celsius. This basically describes us on the legend here. What's the coolest waters we're seeing and what's the warmest? And right now the warmest is here at about the upper 80s to low 90s, versus the other side of Florida here, you're seeing sea surface temperatures in the low 80s. How about that? So almost a 10-degree difference between the east coast of Florida and the west coast of Florida. And why this is important is if we get a tropical cyclone or a tropical wave or a tropical depression that moves into this environment, if other parameters line up perfectly, we could have intense hurricanes this season, especially by September and early October. It's not just the skin of the ocean we have to be concerned about. We also have to be concerned about what happens below the ocean, and this measures that. This is the upper ocean heat content right now as of the 20th of July. So this is today's map here showing us that. And areas in orange is pretty substantial for this time of the year, okay? That's let alone well above average upper ocean heat content. We even have the loop current over, say, over the Gulf of Mexico that is really warm for this time of the year. And we have a bit of that wave break-off loop current over western Gulf of Mexico. That's right around 125 units. So in other words, this area in particular, right here that I circled in, has 150, almost 175 unit joules of heat energy being stored in the ocean. So this is not only at the surface where we are seeing some very warm sea surface temperatures, but this goes down to great depths, say 500, 600 feet below the surface of the ocean. And why that's important is if we get a hurricane barrel situation or something that is very strong, it's not going to really upwell that warm water very well. You're not going to chug away at this very much. And this is able to recover quicker. And so when you get more hurricanes beyond, say, barrel, we can just have repeated intense hurricanes over the same area. Should the pattern favor that, with ridging to the north, these systems are able to kind of bend westward, move over to this area, they could take full advantage. And here's one of those. This is the European Ensemble Prediction System forecast. This is the control run of the potential velocity potential anomaly here. So what this is showing us and illustrating us, to me as an expert here, is this is telling me which areas are going to be conducive for tropical cyclone genesis and which areas are not going to be so favorable for tropical cyclone genesis. So looking forward here, we can see that at least through late July, the Western Pacific is going to be very active with typhoon activity. That's what we see in the forecast here. And usually it's not really the center green colors that you really have to watch closely for, but it's more of this area. If we kind of draw a line that meets halfway across this, so let's kind of draw that up here. And so what this tells us is when we get upper level velocity potentials like this, we actually get divergent flow aloft like this. Okay, so you can think about this part of the MJO or the velocity potential here as a no-brainer for tropical activity. So tropical systems are not likely to develop in that environment, which explains why we're not going to be seeing anything on the European or GFS deterministic or ensembles. But once this wave, once this convective coupled Kelvin wave, what we call it, moves over Africa with already favorable conditions there for a lot of these tropical waves, usually by early August, we should see a lot more aggressive activity there. Once this convective coupled Kelvin wave kind of connects with the interseasonal climatological signal here over Africa, which is down here. I forgot to explain what this actually means. This is a Mercator projection. We could have a very hyperactive outbreak of cyclones, especially by the middle to late August period. We could see a one or two here and there by early August. But once things line up here, once we get upper level flow out of the easterly direction over all these easterly wind anomalies at 200 millibars or 38,000, 35,000 feet above the surface, we get westerly winds below that, right? Because wind, so upward motion replaces the envelope. There's a space, that a void, what we call it. So when you rise a parcel of air in the vertical, you're wanting to replace that air down below to make up for that space, and so that net weight. So what we end up having is, in the low levels, we end up having these westerly winds, and then in the upper levels, we end up having these easterly winds, if that makes sense. Sorry if I'm rambling about this, but this is pretty important because I can see activity really taking place here once we go into the second week or two of August. Maybe the first week of August looks a little more murky though, but more confidence is higher though for mid-August to really be the hot spot for a lot of activity. And this is occurring within a favorable environment of sea surface temperatures that are well above average. I mean, we're nearly 2 degrees Celsius above normal. We have warmed up the waters over here very significantly just to the south of the Azores Islands, because this ridge is now weakening a little bit, and some of the Saharan dust has chugged away at the oceanic anomalies, but those are just at the surface, and I do believe things will really recover quickly. And we're not seeing any signs to me that prevents this season from being hyperactive. I'm very confident that we're going to be in some serious trouble once the season really wakes up by mid to late August and really into September, folks. Early mid-September is ground zero for the meat of this hurricane season, and we will be ready ready to go for the season, to live stream, to make videos if needed. Yeah, going to be very busy, folks. But anyways, if you did enjoy today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Saturday, July the 20th, 2024, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel to get latest tropical weather outlooks, discussions, including live streams and shorts on the YouTube channel, and latest updates on community posts. And also hit the like button and share this video with your family and friends on social media. And never forget to also leave a comment and ring the bell icon as well to let me know that you guys are getting the notifications every time I release a video. But thank you all for watching. That will do it in today's tropical weather outlook and discussion for Saturday, July the 20th.